Hey, Nikki.
Hey there.
How are you?
I'm well.
Okay.
I'm at the office because it's much quieter than having my barking dog.
Okay, I was kind of excited to hopefully maybe have an appearance by your dog, but that's okay, right?
Oh shoot, yeah. If I'd gotten out of work earlier, we would have had an appearance of Vika.
Okay, no problem. No, I'm really appreciate you coming on. Like, I'm really excited about this. Um, so,
Yeah, awesome.
okay, so, and I don't know if you remember, are you okay if I go a little trip down memory lane? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Well, yep.
okay, so first of all, I have two distinct memories of Nikki Kimball. First, and by the way, I have done you, I'm sure, at least a good half an hour of build up on the intro, because I mean your Wikipedia page alone is just like it's like it's very impressive. All the races you've done, I want to talk about those, but I mean obviously the
Okay.
as a therapist and as having you here on the virtual couch, I'm really anxious to talk to you about your integrated running camp. So that's what I'm really excited to talk
Yeah.
about, right? But so I have two.
I'm very excited to grow that project.
Okay, good. All right. So two thoughts. One is I ran into you, and I tried to do the math on this. I went back on my Ultra sign up page, and I found it would have been Way to Cool back in 2008. I think that was my first ever Way to Cool. And
Oh wow.
right, okay, and so I was in the bathroom line with you. It sounds odd for those
Good
non ultra
memory.
running, right? But no, because I was fairly new to the sport, and I had already rolled both of my ankles dozens of times, and I was starting to think, okay, I'll never get this. And I don't know if you remember me telling you the story when we met up in Squaw, but you were able to basically turn your ankles all the way, I felt like, to the ground, and you were kind of showing me that there was these
Yes.
flexibility exercises you could do. Is that true? Do I
Yeah.
remember that right?
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Okay, so I mean,
I mean, I don't remember the specific outhouse conversation, but
sure.
but that I know my ankles can flop any direction. So
Can they really? Okay, and is that something you've had to develop over time, or is that just a gift?
no, it's just genetically my ankles are hypermobile,
Okay,
so I can so I don't sprain usually. Knock on wood.
okay, yeah.
Mobile.
Okay, so what's amazing, and again, I know this is for the ultra running audience, that because I have quite a few of those as well that listen. But so when you're just barreling down some technical trail, and let's any race where there's roots and rocks, and I mean, what's that like for you? I mean, are you just all in, full bore, not worried about rolling ankles and falling?
Yes, yes. I There's nothing I love more than going as fast as I can down something steep and gnarly. I mean,
Wow.
it's as I get older, I can't do it quite as well because my joints are stiffer.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I don't. It seems that every time I actually hurt myself is I'm doing something stupid. Like
Really?
I'm running on a street or riding a motorcycle or doing something silly on skis. Like I never get, knock on wood, I don't tend to get hurt barreling down a technical trail.
That's just amazing. That is. I mean, and that's just gotta feel freeing then, I guess, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like a combination of flying and dancing
Okay. I mean,
is how I see it.
yeah. And are you even? I mean, my head is just looking down the entire time, which is not probably the best way to run. What are you? What is that like for you when do you even pay attention to where you're landing or?
Um, I think at this point, no.
Okay.
I mean, I come from a background of ski racing,
Okay.
so I look for the best line I can take,
Mhm.
I'm all just part of the environment,
Okay.
and so I so yeah, there probably is some thought going there, but I don't. It's not. I think it's happening so fast that it's not conscious. Like, oh, I'm going to put my right foot over 2 inches from this rock.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think I think about it that much. It's such an acquired skill over years and years and years that I just do it. Like a great musician just plays music without really thinking about it. Because I sort of lose time when I'm doing it. I don't.
Wow.
I don't. I'm just in this other state.
Okay, and I love the concept of that other state. So for you, it's not necessarily, okay, how far to the next aid station? I've just got to make it to the next aid station. I mean, do you find yourself all of a sudden, whoa, I'm at an aid station? I mean, is that just time has disappeared?
Yes. Yep.
Really?
Yep,
Okay.
that does happen to me. Especially if I'm going, if it's a lot of downhills that I'm having fun.
Uh-huh.
But I've also had the experience where I've been, too excited on the downhills, like as I get older and I'm not as strong as I was. I remember doing Hurt 100 last year. I was having so much fun on the downhills that I was bombing them as hard as I possibly could,
Uh-huh.
which is a really stupid thing to do in a 100-mile race. So I totally exploded.
You did.
But I was having so much fun because I was running. The downhills are so much fun in that race because they're rooty and muddy and techy, and so destroying my performance, performing poorly because I made a stupid decision was worth it in that particular race because I had so much fun just blasting down downhills. I don't since I moved to Montana, I don't get technical trails like I did in Vermont.
Okay.
There's really nothing on the West Coast that I've run that's anywhere comparable to some of the trails in Europe and the Northeast.
Wow.
So I missed that. So being in Hawaii and just being in this situation where I had proper technical trail to run was, I just lost myself having so much fun. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am racing this as if it's a 20-mile race.
Wow. Yeah, it's 100. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey.
So it was great for the first 20.
Okay. And then, hey, so where does your mind go? I mean, take us through a 100-mile race. I mean, do you have moments do you hit multiple walls? Are there ups and downs? Or, I mean, do you feel like for the most part you're in a good spot?
It's changed over my lifetime. My first race ever was 2004 Western States 100. And I remember finishing and saying to one of my crew, I enjoyed 99 miles out of that 100 miles.
Okay.
And it was true. I was just kind of on a high the whole time.
Wow.
But I don't remember in my 20s and up to my mid 30s actually feeling much pain.
Okay.
When I ran.
Yeah.
And I had an accident in 2007 in which a rock hit me and I subluxed my patella.
Wow.
So my knee kind of came out and back. And I've never run pain-free since.
Wow. Okay.
So, I can run, I'm fine, but it's not pain-free. So I would say before that, basically my running career, I look at it as before that accident and after that accident.
Okay.
So I was a completely different runner.
So, and that was in 2007?
That was end of 2007. Yeah, it was right after I just won UTMB and I came home and I was just on a training run and this rock came off a side hill and just smacked me.
Wow.
So it was just, it was like getting hit by lightning. It was so random. Like,
okay.
I'm just running along the woods and I just get hit by this huge thing.
Yeah.
And I had to, it was hard to get out of the woods because I was actually kind of beat up on both sides. And yeah, that was really awful. And I really haven't run within a mile of those times since that day, which is
okay.
frustrating.
How has that been to you, as far as from an emotional standpoint? I mean, did you always anticipate I will get back to that place?
I thought I would. I thought I could get back to that. And it was really hard. I mean, keeping running, especially after, being undefeated for nearly 7 years.
Wow.
And everything I touched just seemed to turn to gold.
Yeah.
And, I've never been a fast road runner, but I could kind of hold my own a little bit. And then trails, everything I touched was just great.
And it sounds like
and the undefeated thing was on trails, of course, not on road, because I'm not that good a road runner. Mm-hmm. But staying in the sport I knew that I would slow down at some point.
Sure.
But staying in the sport, going through that huge a decline that quickly was really hard. Okay. And
I mean, were you ever tempted to I don't know, go back to something else, not as competitive, or not not on the trails, or
yes. I mean, mm-hmm. I have to admit, I was tempted to not race.
Okay.
Because it was hard on my ego. I mean, I know, that I am anywhere from 1 to several minutes a mile slower than I was at my best. And, during the transition when I was going from very good to good, people would post things like, I beat Nikki Kimball.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
I'm like, yeah, you beat the Nikki Kimball who has 60,000 miles on her body, not the Nikki Kimball who had 40,000 miles on her body.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a different me.
And Nikki, how hard was that? I mean, and if we look back around then 2007 and beyond, I mean, now social media is starting to grow and people do have more access, I guess. I mean, so
Yeah.
was that hard to not want to respond to some of those people?
Yes. Yeah. And I didn't respond.
Yeah.
But here's the messed up thing.
Okay.
Is that, the overwhelming majority of messages I would get would be positive. And it's just the one or two that are negative that I put my brain onto, which is so, I mean, I know it's extremely human of me to do that.
Sure.
But I hate to admit that I'm sucked into that. I'm totally sucked into that. Because there's really no good coming out of a negative comment that's written on the internet. I mean, everybody gets, it's just the way of the world now. Like sort of pontificating on that's not going to do me any good.
But that's what I love, though. I love, I mean, this is your vulnerability, right? And you're right. I mean, that is, in my practice, I do a lot with mindfulness. And, if you really just sit back and observe thought, we can have, in 1 minute, how many thoughts can we have, right? And why do we, why do we attach to that negative? I love how you said you would get, 10 to 1, 100 to 1 positive comments? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've never done the math, but it's probably 100 to 1.
Okay.
I mean, and it's that one thing. I'm certain that that's probably true of many aspects of my life.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure I remember more the professor who, wrote the disparaging comments on an essay that I did than I do of the professors who were like, yeah, that was good.
All the ones that were, like, great job. Here's an A, right?
Yeah.
And before I want to jump in there, but I have to ask you, one of the notes I had taken was in 2006 you took third overall at Western States overall, right? Yeah. And I remember that was about the time where I was doing a lot of volunteer work at Western States, and I was just getting into ultra running, and I remember being at the river, and I remember we were hearing that Nikki could win this thing, right? And I want to know, do you remember what your mindset was that day? I mean, were you looking to possibly be the first woman ever to win Western States overall?
During the day, I realized I was getting up close.
Wow.
And I at that point, I knew that given the right conditions, which would mean very bad conditions, like very, very, very hot, and the men's fields go out hard and beat each other up, that I could do it. But like I knew, it would have to be perfect, and I'd have to have the perfect race. But that is when I thought, I have to win this race.
Okay.
And of course, that is one goal that was unrealized. Yeah. But it was, but podium. I've been on the podium at high level races a few times for the men.
Yeah.
And I love doing that. And granted, the U.S. Yeah. So I mean, granted, there were I don't think we were necessarily running slower then. There were just less people in it.
Okay.
So that's the thing about 100 miles is that we be on the starting line with 5 or 10 people who might win. Now you can be on the starting line with 50 people who might win. Sure. And that's, so it's a different game in that way. Like I think it was easier for a woman to win kind of then, just because you might have 10 really, really fast guys, but that's it.
Sure. I'm in Roseville. My office is in Roseville, right down the road from Auburn, and so there are a lot of Western States junkies here, local. And for those that just know the course and know the race, do you remember specifically when you were hearing about where the people were that were ahead of you, or were there times where you thought, okay, I got to make a push, or do you remember some of the specifics of that day?
No, actually, okay. I mean, it was more kind of after the race that I was thinking, I want to win this, because I didn't know what was happening ahead of me. Gotcha. During it. I was just having fun. I mean, that was still during the days where I didn't really feel much pain when running, and I was just, laughing and dancing and being ridiculous, Nikki, who I was, during that time.
Yeah, I was at mile 78 when you came through. I mean, the first two runners were admittedly they were all locked in and they were really serious, and you were the first one that came through that was, you were asking us how we were doing, and just, it was that's when we were like, she's got to win. We were so excited, right? Yeah. You won a lot of fans there that day. And you mentioned a hot year. I have to tell you the other memory I have, and I don't know if you remember this one, but this was 2015. We were both running states, and we were staying at the Squaw. I had to go back and look at my hotels.com account. What was it? The Resort of Squaw Creek, Squaw Creek, and it was the hot year. And if you remember, the rooms don't have AC, but the hallways do. And
right, we were all hanging out in the hallway.
Yeah, and then you came.
Yeah, I mean that's my first real memory of you. Specifically, and it was so much fun.
It was, and which is really funny because you're paying for this really nice room. You're about to, we're going into this just amazing race, and then we had no AC in the rooms, and so you were nice and hung out with my wife and I that night. And I remember you showed. So you're at work. Do you have that device that you use as a physical therapist?
I do.
I want to see this. I have memories of this. Okay.
My stim.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's right here.
Okay.
So yeah, these little torture devices, and they're fantastic.
Show and tell. Let's see. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
They're a little, and you take this plastic device and scrape it along.
Oh.
Yeah, and it feels so good.
Does it?
I mean, but Tony, here's the thing.
Yeah.
I took my dry needling certification course this fall. Of course, you can't do that in California because it's not legal there, but most states it is.
Is it? Okay, what is that?
So you take needles just like an acupuncture needle. I mean, they are acupuncture needles, but we don't do acupuncture. We do dry needling.
Okay.
And we find the trigger point, the part of the muscle that is that's neuropathic, really, that has some maybe the motor point isn't working really well, or maybe it's sort of stuck. If you think about actin and myosin coming together, and your muscles contract, actin and myosin comes together like this, then they relax like this, and neuropathic muscle is just going to kind of stay like half contracted.
Okay.
And so what happens, you stick a needle into the point where there's the most sort of electrical activity.
Wow. And
the muscle will, the muscles will actually twitch.
Oh.
And yeah, like if I did it to your calf and I did it in the right spot, your foot would actually, it would point your toes.
Okay. Yeah.
So, it used to be thought that A-stim was painful or could be painful, and it really isn't, but some people would think it was. But dry needling it hurts.
Right, how big are the needles?
You do it because it works.
Okay. Are the needles huge? Do you have some of those? All right.
No, they're just like this big.
Okay.
And they're super skinny.
Yeah.
I don't go. The deepest needle I would do would be 4 centimeters. But you're going in. You can put the needle in. Generally I'm working around 2.5 to 3 centimeters deep into the muscle. Of course, I only work on runners, so I've never tried dry needling on like some big CrossFit person.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah,
but there you would have to use a bigger needle.
Okay. And then I remember you were telling my wife A-stim would have been great for plantar fasciitis, right? The A-stim and then what's the dry needling particularly? Are you doing a lot? What do you see a lot of there?
It's very good for plantar fasciitis. But even better for Achilles tendinosis. So releasing those calf muscles, because it's all sort of a continuous fascial plane with the calf muscles, the Achilles tendon, and the plantar fascia. They're all connected. And so I found with my runners that if I release gastroc and soleus, those big calf muscles up above, Achilles and plantar fascia pain gets better.
Okay.
So I actually, what I like to do is treat somebody maybe once a week with dry needling and once a week with A-stim.
Okay.
Plus all the exercises and all the other stuff they're going to do. So yeah, it works nicely.
Hey, I have to ask you. So I know if somebody is coming to you for physical therapy, and you say you only work with runners, and you get somebody who is coming in and they know your background. Do you feel like they're, are they saying, hey, I know I'm not very fast, but do you hear a lot of that?
Yeah, I will get that. But most of my, Bozeman, though growing very fast, still has that kind of small town feel. And And I will go out and run local races, with patients who've graduated from PT, and I'll go at their pace.
I love
and
it.
so
Okay.
people will see that I can run an 11-minute pace for 5K and be happy to do that.
And I find that even if it's my wife who wants to run with me, and she's always saying, it's just going to be too slow. But I mean, that's not what it's about, right? In a situation like that. Yeah.
Yep.
And even for
And
somebody
I used
like
to
you.
always get frustrated that people would say that, like,
Yes.
I'm not going to go with you, I'm too slow. And now I'm the person, especially when I was coming back from hamstring repair, I was the person being like, but I'm too slow to run with you. And I'm like, wait a second, I hated it when people said that to me.
Exactly. I love that. If any of the runners listening, I know that they can identify with that, because there's always somebody that's faster, there's always somebody that's slower, and that's not what
Yep.
it's about. We just want to go run and be with people, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I love it. Hey, can I ask you, talk a little bit about the integrated running camp? I mean, I just, maybe would it be smarter to kind of, tell me where that came from. Why did you decide to put that on? Yeah.
Well, I've been incredibly lucky to have traveled around the world with ultra running, and the sport has given me so much in terms of experience and health and friendships and social bonds, and it's really time for me to start giving back a little bit. And, and I started that, I always, especially when I was with the North Face, they were very encouraging with their athletes for us to pair our running with some philanthropic cause, something like that. So hats off to them.
Okay.
And during my peak of my race career, I did pair running with social justice causes, but then, and in 2007, still towards the peak of my career, I started being public about my experience with depression.
Sure.
And, and at that point, there was just nobody was talking about it. And
what caused you, or how did you feel comfortable, being that vulnerable? Because you're right, that wasn't something that was talked about a lot.
Yeah, it's a very different world.
It is, yeah. Okay.
Well, it was interesting. One of the reasons I hadn't been public about it is because when I would re-credential for my physical therapy license, it would always ask if you had mental illness. And I hate to lie. I would lie on that.
Okay. And because the worries were
frankly, it's an illegal question to ask.
Okay.
But
yeah.
I just, and if I was, and so I was forced to lie, because I'm not going to go in front of a jury to tell them that I'm capable of treating people, despite the fact that I have a mental illness. But there's so much, there's prejudice against mental illness within healthcare, which is so messed up, as you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So 2007, I was kind of on top of the world. Like I was just winning lots of races, traveling the world, running really fast. And I had a lot of confidence from that, first of all. So I had that kind of confidence going in, and I had enough of a social following at that point that I was like, if somebody, if the Physical Therapy Association tries to pull my license because I have depression, I've got the world behind me, and we will fight it.
Okay.
So I knew, and I trust the ACLU would help me out, like that could be a big thing.
Sure.
So I had that kind of confidence going in. And then the other piece of that is that back in the early 90s, when I was first diagnosed, I had two friends, my boyfriend and my best friend, who knew something about depression. My boyfriend knew because of family members and a past girlfriend, and my best friend knew because she went through it.
Okay.
So they were both extremely open and caring, and they saved my life. Like they got me through times that without their help, I wouldn't have gotten through. And I can never pay that back. And so, I knew at that point, when I had that much confidence, I knew the only thing I could do to repay them was to do what they did for me on a bigger scale
And then
for others.
Yeah, and was the reception immediately positive? I mean, did people just overwhelmingly come to your,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. What was
Yeah,
that? What
it
was that
was. And
like?
I was terrified. I actually read the article because 2007 Western States, the Bozeman Chronicle, our daily paper, sent a journalist down with me. And we also had our senior senator, Max Baucus, was down crewing
They
for
crewed
me.
you, right?
And
Yeah. Okay.
he crewed me. And so it was kind of this big deal. And that's back when, I mean, that's crazy. This is a whole another world away. But back when print media had resources to send journalists, to races. And so the journalist, Tim Dumas, did a 4-day series, one on Western States and one on me. Like there'd be one article in the race in general and one on me. And I didn't read any of it till I came home. And when I read the pre-Western States article, I had given him carte blanche to use anything that we had talked about in the paper. Okay. And he had actually at one point wanted to do a book on me. So he had a lot more information than most journalists would have. And I said he could use any of it. And so I read the paper and article. I'm like, there is no way I can go to work tomorrow. Oh. This is the night before I have to go to work when I'm back from California. I'm like, I'm just spread naked on this 2.5 full newspaper pages of information that was.
What do you remember? What stood out? What do you remember that you were worried about? Or?
There was a part where he talked about when I had a bit of a break from probably a combination of having depression and going on birth control pills. And I was in public screaming at the top of my lungs. I mean, this is not typical depression behavior.
Sure.
Having a fight with my boyfriend. And then I came home and took one of his, he never drank and he was drinking that night. And I took one of his beer bottles and smashed it down on a table and started slicing myself with it. And I couldn't get the bleeding to stop. I wasn't trying to, it wasn't a suicide attempt. But I was just in so much pain that I needed some sort of release. And I couldn't get it stopped. So I had to go to the hospital and luckily had a story made up so that I didn't get put into inpatient. Already at that point in my life, I knew that I had to lie in order not to be shipped off somewhere.
Sure.
And, but that was really the big one. I mean, I was clinically, I wasn't sane. And, so I talked about that and a couple other, depression things where my behavior is really, really horrible. And so I thought, how can I go to work? And so the next day, and I've just gotten back to Bozeman, I go to work and I'm working with this veteran and we're through the complicated part. He had a total knee replacement. We're through the complicated part of treatment where I actually have to think and I'm just, throwing electrodes on him. It's not that difficult. And we can just chat. And he looked at me and said, I'm on Zoloft. It saved my marriage. It saved my life.
Wow.
And that was the moment. I mean, there aren't that many aha moments in someone's life.
Yeah.
But when he said this, this guy who had never said anything, we'd never talked about anything deeper than how much we loved our dogs, and then he says this, and I'm certain he's never uttered those words outside the doctor's office or his marriage. And so I was just like, that's what I did was right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, yeah.
So then at that point, then did you feel like, okay, I can own this and I don't have to worry? Okay.
Yep. And it was, and then there was further buildup all that whole week. I had people coming up to me in the grocery store and crying and hugging me.
Wow.
And so, it was very, very powerful. And so I think, my interaction with that gentleman made me know I did the right thing. The weeks following made me realize I wasn't going to take any negative blowback from it.
Sure.
There could be, but I had enough ego that, no one had the guts to say anything negative to my face.
Yeah. Okay. And then meanwhile, you're hearing a lot of people that was giving them the courage to open up.
Yes.
Yeah. So then did a lot of additional articles follow at that point? I mean, do you feel like it it quickly accelerated, or did it kind of, was
It
it
took a
not
few
talked about?
years,
Yeah. Okay.
you know. It's it's really been in the last 5 years. People seem to be talking a lot more about it.
Hmm.
So that was, was very. It was a huge deal locally, which is great, because unfortunately, Montana, as beautiful as it is, always is, has one of the top 3 suicide rates in the country.
No.
And so it's I'm super invested in doing whatever I can to stop suffering
Yeah.
and suicide in this state. So I'm glad that I sort of, started the coming out process as far as depression goes, locally, and now I'm building a business or a charity locally, for aimed at decreasing suffering regarding depression.
And do you feel like have a lot of people then turn to you or ask you questions, or do you get a lot of messages? Direct messages on Twitter. Do you get a lot of people that open up to you?
Yeah, I do get that. I tend not to look at my Facebook, so I don't really know, because I definitely have messages I need to get to. But locally, I've also had people who will call me. Anyone local, they know how to get a hold of me. Wow. They can come in. And I've had parents ask me to talk to their children.
Okay.
Like, the early 20s tends to be late teens and early 20s tends to be a really tough time in people's lives. And parents of that age group will want me to talk to their children, and I'm happy to do that. And then occasionally I'll have patients who choose to come to me for physical therapy, but it's because they also want to talk about how their depression affects their physical condition.
Sure. Okay.
And they know that they can, I'm a safe space for that.
Yeah.
So that's really nice. And luckily I know the psychiatrists and some of the psychologists in town, obviously. So I can get them to the right person.
You get case manager. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I might be sort of this public face of depression, but I'm not an expert on depression. I mean, so I need to make sure I get them to the right person.
Yeah. And have you run it? So I try to talk a lot on my podcast about no fixing and judgment statements, trying to just be empathetic when somebody is going to try to open up. And I'm curious, have you run into people that will say these unempathetic things like, I just don't get it, or, hey, you're winning races, why aren't you happy? Or do you get those kind of comments?
I don't personally so much, but a lot of my friends do.
Okay.
I think I've been such a, I've been so public and loud about my advocacy for people with mental illness and for decreasing stigma. I think it would be hard for somebody to come to me and say that.
Sure. Okay.
But they definitely have to my friends, and including, people we run with have said things like that to friends of mine who run with us who have depression, but they won't say it to me.
Okay.
Do
you have some good advice? I mean, when people come to you and say, hey, how do I handle this when somebody just doesn't understand me?
I usually tell them to talk to me, because I'll be, because I will advocate for them, because when I'm in a bout of depression, there's no way I could advocate for myself.
Sure.
So, if I know the person who made the comment, I'll take them aside and explain how my depression presents, and, how you take somebody who has a very good education and has been successful in a sport and, on paper looks great. Yeah. And when I'm in a bout of depression and I can't read a book, I can't do simple math, of course I could be faking that, I suppose, but if I'm willing to say, here I'm in this professional career, and I can tell you that I can't add basic numbers when I'm sick, that's not, it's not something to be proud. It's not something that somebody would be proud of,
Sure.
But because I get so much more positive reinforcement, from being out, I feel like I'm happy to put myself in the line of fire for that.
Yeah. And what role did, if I go back to, let's just say, your Wikipedia page, and I mean, some of the things that I wasn't even aware of, what you were an Olympic qualifier, and was it the pentathlon? I mean, some of those things.
Oh, biathlon.
Biathlon. Okay, biathlon. And early in the day, I mean, so where it was, competition or athletics, or, I mean, was that kind of a go-to to try to deal with or handle depression early on?
I think athletics was a go-to because I wanted to make the U.S. ski team. Since I was, I was skiing before I could walk.
Wow.
And so the skiing was there anyway. And so, Olympic trials and biathlon was just sort of an extension. That's cross-country skiing and shooting.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And love biathlon. It's a great sport. And so, that was there. And it probably, in hindsight, the fact that I was doing those sports may well have saved my life, but it may also have prolonged the time from which I was symptomatic to when I was diagnosed.
Okay. When was that diagnosis?
So the diagnosis was 94. So a few months after, I had a decent Olympic trials, a very good national championships, and then within a few months, I was, 20 pounds lighter and couldn't read a newspaper article. And I was just not functional at all. I couldn't work. So that was very easy to diagnose at that point because I was so dysfunctional.
Yeah.
But probably from puberty to that time, I look back and I see how depression affected me. I mean, hindsight's so nice, but,
right.
And I think everyone else just thought I was a really emotional kid. Okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So then how did that lead to the idea for the integrated running camp?
Yeah. So, I love running. I mean, so even if I'm not racing as well, I'm still out there racing just because it's fun and because I love to run. And I know that running, that aerobic exercise, now that there is hard evidence to support that aerobic exercise can help with treatment of depression.
Yeah.
I've been given exercise as just this gift. I mean, my parents started me off on skis. They started me running. It was just sort of, this was part of my life. And so I've never had to think about getting into sports.
Okay.
It's always been there. Yeah. But there are plenty of people suffering with depression who haven't had that advantage. And so integrated running came about. It's something I've been thinking about for years, but in the last couple of years, since a new psychiatrist came to town, she and I have become running partners. Fortunately, she got injured right when she moved to town. So I treated her and then we became running partners. Right. And so when I'm running with a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist and, some other, we're just, the best ideas come out when you're running.
Sure. It sounds like the start of a joke, but I mean, in yours, it's like, no, we were bouncing ideas off.
A psychiatrist, a psychotherapist, and a physical therapist.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They go running in the snow.
That joke could be bad.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I had done, to credit Team Red, White, and Blue and Liza Howard and the work she does with them, I had been to one of their camps where they use running and exercise as a way to help soldiers come back to civilian life and thrive.
Okay.
And so I'd been at one of those 3-day camps. Like, this can work for depression. Mm-hmm. I mean, this will work. And so we put together some programming of mindfulness training and running safety and core strength, and then some, psych, to talk about what, having a psychiatrist talk about what depression is and why exercise will help, and the therapists come and tell the difference between someone with a master's of social work and someone who has a licensed clinical counselor, and because I think it's really important for people to know, his part was really important in that, how would you know entering the healthcare system what the difference is between someone who is actually professionally trained to counsel somebody with a mental illness versus a life coach.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the dangerous things we have going on right now. I mean, we have people coaching running who have no education in physiology or biomechanics. We have it all over, and we have people who are trying to help people with their psychological, mental health, who have no training. And so integrated running, one of the things we're trying to teach is, make sure you get to a proper, the proper person to help.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to admit that I can't help with the depression. I can help I can work with your psychiatrist so that we know how to dose your running, essentially.
Sure. Yeah.
But I know that that my professional expertise ends here.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be coaching somebody on nutrition. I'm not going to be coaching somebody on mindfulness. That's not my area.
Yeah. So what did that weekend look like then? How many days, or was it a weekend, or was
so
it
was
more?
3? It was
days?
A weekend. So, okay. but really 2 full days and 2 nights. So we, a friend of ours, one of the women who's part of Integrated Running, she lost her husband to suicide in 2009, and they owned an adventure company. So they have this lodge down in Gardner, Montana, and we could house 10 people easily. They're all in their own rooms, and so they would come in Friday afternoon, and we kind of went over. So since we've only had one camp, went over ground rules. When you have a bunch of people who have, a serious mental illness,
sure,
there's certain ground rules that have to be there. So the psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, they would talk about that. And then we cooked dinner, and the 2 cooks were me and my best friend from childhood, who's a medical doctor here.
Oh, wow.
And so we would cook, and then Andrea would go over nutrition, what nutrition things might help if you have depression.
Well, and when I was doing some digging on you, I mean, I know that you've gone. I mean, is it safe to say that you've experimented with different diets that have kind of helped you with whether it's performance or has it been part of that is with your emotional health as well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So for me, a high-fat diet has been fantastic for my depression. If I'm on a higher carb diet, it for me personally, it's really not good on my mood, and I tend towards more depression and a little bit more swinging of moods.
Okay, and I think that's significant. I mean, I don't think a lot of people look at diet as far as with depression, right? I mean, okay, and when I'm trying to
need a lot more information on that.
Sure.
The nutrition, the diet, the registered dietitians and the medical doctors and the therapists, we just don't have enough information. I mean, I think there is a lot more study of ketogenic diets as they get more popular, but I don't think I want to know, is it just having, is there a certain percentage of your diet that should be fat, and is that going to change your mental health? And it might work for one person, it might not work for another. And so it's an area where if there's any budding researchers in nutrition out there, this is an area that absolutely needs to be studied.
Because then we're not talking about fat like, hey, I need more Oreos. I mean, you're talking about healthy fats, right?
Right. Healthy or bacon.
All right, I'm in.
Yeah,
keep
so
talking.
It's not all super healthy. I mean, my lipid levels are very good, and I eat plenty of things that would traditionally have been considered bad, with like yolks of eggs and butter and meats that have fat in it. Okay. So, and lots of nuts and.
Yeah, I didn't hear Kit Kat there though at all, huh?
No.
All right, okay. Fair enough, but no, I do, and I think that when I'm working with clients in particular, and I'm trying to say, hey, we need to make sure we hydrate, we need to make sure we sleep, eat right, some mindfulness.
Yep.
A lot of times I get almost this blank look, like, no, I'm here to talk about my depression, and so
right.
I do feel like there's so much more that, I mean, I'm so grateful that we're 10 years down the road from what you were, kind of talking about. We're so much further, but boy, we've got a long way to go, right?
We do have a long way to go, but at least we're looking at it.
Yeah.
I mean, and you remember in the 1990s where, the psych field was not thinking about nutrition at all with respect to depression. but they also weren't thinking about running.
True.
Or they exercise. I mean, I remember when I had an absolutely amazing psychiatrist when I was in Idaho and I was first, and I was ski racing and I was first diagnosed, and he was amazing. And then I went to graduate school and went to this, I guess he was a psychologist. I don't even remember. He's some doctorate of some sort. And he asked me, well, what do you do when you're not studying? Well, I run. What are you running from? And I mean, the dude even looked like Sigmund Freud. I just, and I was just like, have you ever thought about what I'm running toward? I just,
sure.
But I didn't have the guts or the
voice,
or the information behind me. I mean, I knew in my heart that exercise was key to my health, but I didn't have the peer-reviewed papers to, just stuff in his face and be like, have you looked at anything since Freud?
Yeah.
So we're just, I think the entire mental health profession is just gaining traction on, with respect to nutrition and exercise and integrating into medicine in general and not just being this separate thing.
Yeah, boy, can I go on a tiny tangent with you real
absolutely.
quick? So when people find out about how much you run, when you get the inevitable, how are your knees? You're breaking down, that sort of thing. What's your go-to? I mean, every runner I talk to has their go-to. What's your response typically?
Well, I like the articles that came out in the orthopedic journals in the 2000 aughts that showed that, decreased incidence of osteoarthritis in regular runners than the general population.
Absolutely. Okay. I think that we all have that one that we fall back on, right? But still, I mean, do you get that as much as I would imagine?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I do. But then they see what I can still do, that I'm 46 and I'm jumping off cliffs with skis on my feet, and what can they really say?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I've had some serious injuries, but every one of my injuries has happened with some sort of accident. It hasn't been running. It's, I can't call being hit by a rock. That's not a running accident. I happened to be running at the time, but it was a rock accident.
That's right. Yeah. And I
didn't hit the rock hit me.
Right. It's perfect timing. And I feel like that's another area that we're going to eventually, kind of get better with is the biomechanics, and we're going to find out that a lot of the running injuries are people that have ramped up too quickly, or we're running on the camber of the road, or not switching out shoes enough, or and I feel like that if you're paying attention to a lot of that, I mean, the body's pretty amazing, right?
Yes, and I think the literature is actually pretty clear on that. Most of the running in the physical therapy literature is pretty clear that most running injuries are a result of training errors.
Okay. And then overcompensation and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
it's not running itself. I mean, there are some people whose mechanics do not lend themselves well to running.
Sure, yeah, and then because there are people that might have a leg an inch shorter, or we hear some of those kind of biomechanical issues, right?
Absolutely. But then I've seen, I've treated a patient who has this very, very significant scoliosis and leg length difference, but she can, as long as, she can run half marathons, no problem. I mean, she's fine, but that requires some tweaking.
Okay.
You have to, do we want to lift this shoe? Do we not want to? And all the tweaking has to be done incredibly slowly.
So there's a lot of patience there. They kind of have to want to, right? Yeah. Yeah,
they have to want to. And then I can't give them a heel lift and tell them to go out and run their regular distance. I can give them a heel lift and say run a quarter mile.
Yeah, and then let's see what the data is, right?
Comes
in. And I know I'm jumping around a little bit. I went on that tangent, and I want to make sure we give more to the integrated running camp. But you used the word traction, and man, I loved your movie Finding Traction. That was it Indiegogo, or that was one of the first.
It was Indiegogo. Yep.
One of the first crowdfunding things I ever did was supporting that project, and couldn't wait to get the.
And then it took us 3 years to get the movies out.
Oh, but it was amazing.
We didn't get any other funding.
Yeah. But, and now
they did a fantastic job with that.
They really did. I mean, boy, that's funny. Now that I go back to your comment about bacon earlier, right? There was a lot of
there was a lot of bacon in that.
A Love
Yeah.
it. So,
I mean, I really should have had a bacon sponsor for that movie.
yeah,
That could have, I mean, some bacon company could have funded the entire film.
oh, I was like, I have to. I mean, so for those who are my therapy folks that are listening to the podcast, so Finding Traction talked about you running. It was Vermont's Long Trail, right? So,
Yep.
Which is how long, Nikki?
273 miles.
273 miles, and
It's like 60,000 feet of gain, 63, something like that.
Okay, and did you take months to do that, Nikki?
Yeah, a few days.
A few days, right? Yeah.
5 days.
5 days, yeah. I mean, and again, if anyone wants to just see an amazing documentary, it's Finding Traction. It's on Netflix, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I mean, from a mental health standpoint, or just even, tell me what was that like, 3, 4 days in? I mean, I thought the documentary did a nice job because you would kind of see these mood swings, basically depending upon the amount of bacon that you had consumed, right? But I mean,
right, exactly.
But I mean, the sleep was started to be a real challenge, and there's physical pain. What was that like?
The mood swings were pretty crazy.
Okay.
I was really quite well for about 3 days, and then stuff just started to fall apart. And but emotionally, like anything else. I mean, would you sign up for a 100-mile race after most? Like 1 minute after finishing a 100-mile? Probably not.
No.
And
No.
so I don't think I remember, except that I've seen the film.
Yeah.
I feel like most of the time I was doing pretty well in my memory.
Yeah.
Then I see this film, I'm like, oh God, I was ugly. And of course the film, because it's a documentary, they do want to document to make running interesting. They need to show the highs and lows, and it'd be pretty boring if it's just left, right. Oh, I'm happy.
Sure.
So, it was good for me to see how low I got and see that on film. And I had nothing to do with the editing, no power at all. The film is not, I had nothing to do with putting the story together or any of the film. And I'm so happy that the editors and the producer were so brutally honest with it.
Yeah.
I have subsequently seen people putting documentaries together where the subject of the documentary is giving feedback. Mm-hmm. And it just makes me upset because we have no right to be in control of the media that they have. I mean, if it's a true documentary, it shouldn't be glorifying the athlete. I mean, like all humans, I have some very ugly sides to me and some really great sides to me. And so I am so happy that the main film event of my life was done by very professional, master, they had their MFA, which is the terminal degree, Masters of Fine Arts degree, terminal degree for documentary film from Montana State University, which is an excellent program. So, I'm really, really lucky that I can be that I can look to that film and say it's honest and say it's brutal.
But I think that's one of those good old metaphors for life of, I mean, the ups and downs, and because we go back to whether we're talking about mindfulness and where our mind goes, and 1 minute we can have this joy and you're doing it in 273 miles and you're going to make it, and the next minute it's, what am I doing and what do I have left?
Right.
And
just, can you just shoot me now?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
So
right.
And,
and then you make it through. And that's one of the things I love when I get to, I mean, I don't have any of the wins or these things that you've been through, but I love just talking about the multiple walls that you hit or the, so sure, you're going to feel down, but give it a little time and kind of be present. Right. And boy, you did that so well in that movie. I mean, just continuing to move forward, be present. Right.
Yeah. And that's it. And running is a sport that is accessible to everybody. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about it. And I think the film shows that. I mean, I'm not fast I'm not moving very fast in those days, 4 and 5. I'm not doing so well. But really, if there's anything to come out of my running career, it's not the wins. It's not the U.S. teams I've been on. It's not all the course records I've had. Like those, the next year somebody else is going to win, and the next year somebody else is going to win. Nobody remembers that.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember it for that year.
Yeah.
But what about that person who is, they've just hit their 5-year post chemo mark and they're cured, and then they go out and they mark that by running a 100-mile race. Like that person is more impressive than anything I did, or at least as impressive. And so it's kind of nice to be on the sort of older end of my career as a runner and recognize how fleeting the importance of actual winning is.
Okay.
And how deep the effect of running and the friendships and the experiences I've had are. I mean, I don't remember every race, but I remember going to China at this time and going to South Africa at this time, and watching my teammates, pair a South African trip with saving AIDS orphans and near Durban, and working with her on that. Like that has meaning. Yeah. And not that winning doesn't. I mean, winning absolutely has meaning in and of itself, but there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
And
well, it sounds like winning gave you the access. I mean, winning gave you access to do all of these other things, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, it did. It gave me some power that I could do with what I pleased. I had a voice that people are going to listen to, and I love that I have that because I'm so, I'm absolutely passionate, obviously, about mental health and decreasing stigma and all that. And so if I can use the power that I've gotten through my running resume, that my running resume gives me, to affect change, or to start affecting change, or will continue to affect change in mental health. I think we know the stigma is decreasing anyway, because lots of people are doing exactly what I'm doing and fighting it. And I want to see healthcare change such that that people in mental health and people in physical health professionals are working together.
Sure.
And it's coming. And if I can be part of that, it's just such an exciting place to be, because we're seeing this overlap and this intersection of physical and mental wellness. And and how lucky am I to have this running resume that I can, my pet project that I care about, I get to do a little bit more with it, even though like running races isn't really related to to the cause I'm going for now.
Yeah, but and you also had the courage to open up about it at a time when that was difficult, which is that says a lot. I think that does. Yeah.
I'm really glad of that.
So what do you hope to do with the integrated running camps moving forward? I mean, do you hope to spread those into different places or hold those more often?
Yes, ideally. I mean, I've never started a 501c3 before.
Okay.
And so right now we're all of us who are involved in it are passionate about mental wellness. None of us is good at business. So actually this Friday we're meeting to get our board together, to start getting people on our board.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And we need people who can do business and people who can do marketing and people. So ideally we're kind of going, I talked to actually a former president of HOKA, Jim Van Dyne, who's just lovely. Because he's very, very good at business. You don't get that high in business without. So I spoke with him about how do we get integrated running to impact the most people, and so somewhat from his advice, though we've been thinking about it anyway. Next year, after our first camp, we are having then weekly runs that anybody can join. They don't have to have gone to that camp, and weekly runs leading up to. We have 2 races in the area that are support mental wellness, mental health. And so we'll have one session of of weekly runs leading up to one of those races, and then we'll start it again. And these weekly runs there will be at least one integrated running person there. So if I'm the person leading that run, we will do physical therapy, injury prevention, exercises.
Okay. Yeah.
If Dr. Rich is the person who's leading it, he'll do mindfulness exercises during the run. If our social worker Justin Short leads it, he'll add some other type of therapy bent to the run. So it's running, but with this really not just a running group. I mean, we're a running group that is focused on mental health.
Okay. Not just going out.
Yeah.
Not just going out for a run. There's so much more to it. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the big question that I want to answer with integrated running, and that not necessarily with integrated running, I don't care who answers it, is we know that exercise is great for people with depression, but we also know that depression steals motivation to exercise.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so where is that? What is it? How do you bridge that gap? And that's that's the goal of integrated running, is bridging that gap. And I think in our first camp, we asked for feedback, and we're like, please be honest. And I think we were a little bit light on the psych end.
Okay.
And so we're changing that to bring a lot more psych into it. But where the other thing, and what Jim Van Dyne and I were talking about, is if we have weekly runs, there is the accountability that you have. I know everybody is meeting at this trailhead at 7 a.m. on Saturday. I'm going to be there.
And sometimes that's all it takes. I mean, that accountability, right? And I don't want to steal your time, but I have to tell you. So, I work with a lot of people with depression, and I do get a fair amount of people that I would love to just write a prescription for running. And I've done a couple of podcasts on what I call the emotional baseline theory. And so I do feel like, when life is going well and someone's baseline of emotion is high, they're being met with all the challenges of the day, work and relationships and those sort of things, and they can respond well. But then when depression hits and their baseline of emotions lowers, all the same things are hitting them on a daily basis.
Yes.
And the lower, then as they don't respond as they think they should, and I try to encourage people not to be should on, right? But then their baseline of emotions goes lower, and so a lot of times I start saying, okay, I just want to find any bit of self-care that can bump that baseline up a little bit, because the more we can bump it little by little, then we're going to hit some point where then we can kind of meet these demands. But when people are low, they're looking, it's like as if they're at the bottom of a hole looking up, and everybody's just saying, just do this, right? And so that's the part I love about, if you can get this accountability piece, you can get somebody just to get up, and even if it's like go for a walk or whatever that is, bumps that baseline up enough that, okay, now maybe they feel like they can do something else, self-care.
Yeah, at least take a shower.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly, right? Yeah. And then once that happens.
I mean, there are times I've had to have, like, my friends have come into the house and been like, you haven't taken a shower in 3 days. You are, and it takes them, literally coming into my house and pulling the covers off me and forcing me to go for a run. And I'm all pissy for like a couple miles, and then I'm fine.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the things we want to teach is, our goal, the reason we've been doing, we're initially setting the camps up to be local. One is that we don't have any money. Like we're, we don't want people to pay very much to do this. We want it accessible to everyone.
Right.
So here we have free housing, and we can do the cooking for very, very little money because we know how to cook.
Yeah.
And so we've got that. But the other reason to do it locally and hopefully to then go, do it in many different places is that if everybody's from the same city or town or county who's at camp, then maybe, Joe meets Sarah and they live next door to each other, and they can call, wake each other up and be like, come, let's go for a run. Because I think it is, those of us with depression can keep each other alive and keep each other thriving.
Absolutely.
Because we're not all down at the same time.
Yeah.
And, so the person who's up, it's incumbent upon her to, give a hand up to the person who's not doing well.
Yeah.
So that's part of the strategy is get people, and I don't think we necessarily managed that the first camp, but that's why we're tweaking it.
Sure. Yeah. No, it sounds wonderful, right? Hey,
Yeah. So,
I've already kept you over an hour. Are you okay if I ask a couple of kind of silly questions before we go?
yeah.
I am curious though. So when we've been at Western states and we've had some of the runners from Japan or some other countries come through, I love watching them look at the the table full of food and kind of like, okay, I don't know what I'm looking at here, right? And you have raced all over the world. I mean, have you had that experience where you're pulling up to?
Absolutely.
Hey, what have you seen? What have you tried? What's that been like?
Yeah, Taiwan, and I had a World Cup race at Taiwan and in Japan, so very different foods that were different. In Taiwan, these little kind of doughy wrap sweet things that taste good when you're not running, but it turns out when you try to taste them, you can't even swallow it if you're American and you just don't have that talent.
Yeah.
And then in Japan, we were there for World Championships 2005, which is why I missed Western States that year. And it's about 85 degrees, bright sun, really humid. So really, seems hotter than Western States. And there's sushi on the table.
Oh, good old
and I'm
raw
just
fish.
like,
okay.
Raw fish in 85 degree weather. I think I'm not going for that.
Didn't try it, huh? No,
didn't try it. So I've definitely had some interesting foods, particularly in Asia.
Yeah.
But, as a Westerner going to Asia, the food is more different. If we go to Europe, it's okay. There might be a croissant or something like some awesome French pastry. Okay.
You're in at that, right? And I noticed that, did you run in India?
I did. Yeah. I helped a friend. Like? Yeah. Well, I've run in India a couple of times. I've raced there once, which was great. And I was helping out a friend of mine, Sam Gash, who ran across the northern part of India in order to raise money for education, to sort of decrease, she's another one of those people who's running and trying to use that. Her passion is children. Mm. And, how do you make a system more equitable? You educate people and you educate girls and you, and so she put together this nearly 3,000 kilometer run across India to raise money and awareness of the need for education, and gave that. She raised $140,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So and that's. I love this sport because it just seems everywhere you turn, somebody is doing something amazing.
Sure. Yeah.
And,
yeah. Oh, what's been? Do you have a go-to most difficult race?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay.
They're all difficult in their own way.
Yeah. What about? And I'm going to pronounce this wrong. I always have. I always read it. But the Marathon des Sables, right?
Des Sables.
Des Sables. Okay, you won that. But I've heard that that's incredibly difficult. Is that?
Well, I think every race wants to call itself the toughest foot race on earth.
Yeah, sure.
And really, Marathon des Sables, I love it. Went into it with a bad attitude because I had heard of some sort of nationalistic stuff that happened before my time there.
Okay, tell people where's that? Yeah, where's that at? Where?
Well, it's in Morocco, but it's a French run race.
Okay.
And I had heard stories of, of non-French runners getting, getting penalties for stupid stuff. And I think some of that might have happened. And I had also heard, I also knew that the women's prize money was much, much less. And so I refused to run it until the women got equal prize money.
Wow. Okay. I hadn't heard
because
that.
I just absolutely won't do that.
Yeah.
And it was, there was a big discrepancy there, but, I have to say, being there myself, and I don't know, I didn't see any of that.
Wow.
I thought that the French race officials were extremely fair to me. They put up with my horrible attempts to speak French, and they would help me with that. And I didn't feel maybe there were mistakes made in the past. I didn't feel any of that. So here I go in kind of like negative Nelly. And then worse, on the trip into the race, the bus going in, we saw a horrible accident, or the aftermath of, and literally saw 2 people dying on the road. And so I get there and I'm just like, I don't want to be here. I've heard horrible things about this. And then I just watched these 2 guys die and there's blood everywhere. And so I went into it just as negative as I could possibly go into it, with negative expectations.
Wow.
And they had amazing medical, they had amazing organization, they had good, the people making sure the rules were being done I thought, very fair. And, so every negative thing I went in there expecting was turned on its head.
So
and
how
so
far into the race?
Really nice.
How far into the race did it take you to then feel like, okay, I'm here, I'm present, I can do this?
You know what? Actually, it happened the first day.
Okay.
I think, I'm very weather sensitive, and it was so bright sunny. And this was the first sun I'd seen in a while, because it's winter in Montana, and not that we don't have sun, but it was the first, like, wow, look at the sun.
Yeah.
And I was just like happy. I just that first day, I was just like, my mood completely changed. I still wasn't necessarily, I still had heard a lot of, I still knew the bad stuff that I had heard about the race. So I still wasn't necessarily trusting, but the people, because of the top runners get all their equipment checked and all of that. And, the first time I went through that, and the lead woman was a French woman, Laurence Klein, and she is awesome. And she went through it, and we ended up just sort of joking a lot, and joking about, oh, she's not French, we should take that out of her pack, and making fun of some of the bad reputation that had been there previously.
Sure.
And it was wonderful. I mean, the people were, like, I realized pretty quickly that it was fair, it was transparent, and I can't say enough good about that race, especially since I was such a poor sport going into it.
Yeah, okay. There's some life lessons there, right? There really are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, what do you have coming up? What's next for Nikki?
Well, I'm finally running. Well, I've been running for a while, but I'm having had my hamstring repaired because of a vicious parking lot accident. So I'm actually going to race Lookout Mountain 50 mile in Chattanooga, December 12th. And that'll be my first post-injury race. And I haven't been doing speed work yet, except uphills. I still am not allowed to run fast on flat, but luckily 50 miles you're going to run slow.
Okay.
So,
yeah, sure.
So that's my next thing. And then, next year, I don't really know. I mean, I don't know where I doubt I'll have much sponsorship, because I've had a great year of not racing. So I think next year's goal is to get integrated running.
Nice.
Going. But I of course I still put in for Hard Rock, because I always want to get into that race, and I put in for Western.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. And I will probably do Georgia Death Race. So, maybe I come back to a speed which can, get me into Western States. Maybe I don't. I have a lot of miles on my body, so I'm not expecting that, but I'm really looking forward to the sort of new phase of going into integrated running and doing work on the mental health front with exercise.
I love it. And okay, so the lottery is this Saturday. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah, I'm in there as well.
Hard Rock.
Yeah, okay.
Hard Rock and Western. It's a big day.
Wow. Okay, that is kind of exciing, right? Hey,
did you put in for it this year, Tony?
I'm in States. Yeah, I'm in the States lottery. But matter of fact, I had to go run the Cayuga 100K with very little training. I was coming off of a couple of broken ribs, and so I totally did a mindfulness run, and it was one of the greatest experiences ever. I mean, it really was. So
isn't it funny how that happens? The greatest experiences happen when we go in.
Oh, I had no expectations, and not as much training.
Well, you nailed it right there.
Oh, yeah, right, and it was a blast. So, all right. Well, I have been looking forward to this for so long. I really appreciate you taking the time and the integrated running. I hope that is something you'll be able to bring here to Auburn. I mean, and we've got the
I hope
trails,
so.
right?
Auburn
And,
is definitely one of the places we're hoping to come.
yeah, and then hopefully we will both get pulled for states. We will then
Yeah.
repeat the Squaw Creek experience. My wife just thinks you are the greatest person ever, and so I'll tell her that to make sure and watch this podcast. So thanks so much for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Okay, and hopefully if you don't mind, maybe down the road we can catch up again.
I think we should, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Oh
and
no, gosh! I mean, that's
I love it. I mean,
it's you're. I love though. You had the platform and you had the courage, and even when that wasn't in vogue, and that has made my job so much easier. And I do have to tell you honestly, I've pointed people to a couple articles that I have bookmarked where you've been pretty open about your struggles with depression, and that has helped a lot of people. Some people very close to me, as a matter of fact. So I'm grateful for your being vulnerable and for what you've done. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. All right, I will hopefully see you up in Squaw, and then maybe another time down the road here on the virtual couch. Okay.
That would be fantastic.
All right, thanks, Nikki.
Thank you,
All
Tony.
right, bye-bye.